President Trump is bringing a real sea change when it comes to some of the U.S. government's policies. But what effect are these changes having on the children of immigrants? We'll discuss this issue on Talking with Henrietta next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. President Trump's administration has just observed its first 100 days. Since his administration started, he has signed a number of executive orders affecting the environment, health care, immigration, and other key issues. The new policies he has proposed have been embraced in some quarters and opposed in others. On this show, my two guests, Nunu Kadani and Samina Sundas, will share their perspectives on the effects some of the president's proposals are having for many children in immigrant communities. Ms. Kadani, who is seated on my left, is a graduate of the University of California at Berkeley and a founding member and current director of Priority Africa Network, an advocacy organization based in Oakland, California. For nearly 3 decades, she has worked on Africa-related program and policy matters, written and spoken on issues of refugees and migrants, human rights, and racial and economic justice. Ms. Kadani was recognized by the White House as a Champions of Change recipient, receiving an award for her work on behalf of African communities in the U.S. Samina Sundas is seated on my right. Ms. Sundas is of Pakistani heritage and also resides in the Bay Area. She has served as a commissioner on the Santa Clara County Human Relations Commission, and she as a board member of various similar Silicon Valley organizations. She is the founding executive director of the American Muslim Voice Foundation, and she has been working towards bridging cultural and religious gaps and has spoken to members of Congress about the human impact of our immigration system. Well, welcome to the show. It's a real pleasure having you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Now, it's my understanding that there are more immigrant children in this country right now than any other children. They're being born more than others in this country. So I'm wondering, has the plight of immigrant children worsened or is it better? How would you describe it?
So I think it has worsened. It's really for all immigrant children, including Muslims, Latinos, any other children that have come here, especially at this time. Latino and Muslim children are the worst target of Trump's hatred and rhetoric that he had during the election.
Is it worse than shortly after 9/11, do you think?
Yes, Islamophobia and the treatment of Muslims, children, and the mosque and community centers, and anybody wearing a hijab going out there is a victim at this time.
Nunu, would you agree with that?
I do. Just to sort of give you a sense of who are the community groups that we primarily work with at Priority Africa Network, we're looking at mostly sub-Saharan African communities.
Which would include
countries south of the Sahara, or
like
sometimes
Sudan,
popularly known as Black Africa, as opposed to the North African countries. And the highest numbers are Nigerian, Ethiopian, Eritrean, Somali, Kenyan, Ghanaian. There are 6 or 7 countries that have some of the highest numbers in terms of coming to the United States. So when you look at children specifically, children fall into a very interesting sort of space, right? Because when they're born in the United States, they're not technically counted as immigrants because they are American citizens, and yet within the community where their parents go to worship or the community center, they are part of the immigrant community, right? So we claim them. Our children are part of our community. So when we look at the fate of children, it's almost impossible to separate that from the fate of their parents, right, or the community.
Now that assumes, because they're in an immigrant community, that they're worse off than they would be if they were not in an immigrant community.
That's exactly, yes, because when, you cannot separate the children from their families. If their families are undocumented, if their families are Muslim, if their families are targeted for whatever offense or, and their citizenship is revoked or under threat of revocation, children are directly impacted. And even if none of this were to happen, the atmosphere of fear that has been created under this administration, you hear countless anecdotes from parents and family members who say, my 7-year-old said to me, or my 5-year-old said to me, this man is he going to hurt us? So there's a sense
when
of
you
fear.
think of those in immigrant communities at this particular time who might be fearful, you don't necessarily think of those from sub-Saharan Africa. You think of those primarily, do you, from the Middle East and maybe from Mexico, not from...
Actually, absolutely. I mean, what the term immigrant has almost become synonymous with Spanish speaking. When we talk about immigration, people have this kind of context within which it's Gonzalez who came across the border and he's undocumented and repeatedly. And this is the struggle that we have when we work with communities that are sub-Saharan, and I'm sure this is partly true when you work with communities that are from Pakistan and Afghanistan and India. It's almost as if you have to make a case that we too exist. We too are part of the immigrant community.
So what you're saying is, yes, but if you have to make a case, maybe what that says is that you're not targeted, or you shouldn't feel targeted.
I wish that were true, but it's actually the opposite of truth.
Okay.
Because black immigrants, according to a study from the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, the state of black immigrants, and people can go find it on the website, www.blackimmigration.net. Is it .org? Actually, I think it's
well,
.org.
Black immigrant, and they could search. Okay.
Blackimmigration.org, right. The state of black immigrants, even, you could Google it. One of the things that really popped out from that study is that black immigrants are targeted 5 times more than other immigrants for detention.
Latino immigrants?
No, black immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa,
yes,
from
but
the
I
Caribbean.
was saying more
more than
really?
Other immigrants in general, yes. So you have the numbers, some of the lowest for black immigrants. But in terms of being targeted and picked up and detained and arrested, we're 5 times likely to be arrested than any other immigrants, whether it's Latinos or, API or
I
Asian.
hate to have to say we'll get back to that. We will, but I need to give you a chance to talk.
Sure. So, as Nunu was saying, one of the impact that immigrant children have right after 9/11, Muslim community was targeted. And 500 Muslims just disappeared. Nobody knew where they are. And the government did not want to tell them.
In this country?
In this country.
Where? No, what I'm saying is immigrants in a specific community or immigrants throughout the U.S.?
Muslims throughout the
500 of them disappeared.
500 immediately disappeared, and for a long time we didn't know what happened. I don't know if you're aware of that. Then in December there was a program started, special registration for Muslims. 26 countries were required to register, with the exception of North Korea, all Muslim countries. If you're 16, a male, from that time until the day you die, unless you had a green card or you were a citizen, all male members must register. to just go to, at that
With
time.
immigration
With
authorities.
immigration authorities.
So the 500 who disappeared, you said they didn't know where they were.
Yeah.
Were these primarily males?
Yes.
And where did they go?
Well, nobody knows. After a long time, they were released and all that.
Oh, they were detained.
They were detained, put in prisons. Their family didn't know what happened. Where did they just disappear? So
Because they had, what, Arabic surnames?
they had Muslim names.
So was there any follow-up action?
So
I mean, you can't just take people off the streets
yes,
and
you can.
detain them.
When they passed the laws, just like they did, Patriot Act. Under the Patriot Act, even the U.S. citizen could be just, picked off from the street and put in just jail. All they have to say is just say, our security is threatened. Our nation's security is threatened.
So citizen or non-citizen, or those
Citizens or non-citizen from those 500. But the program they started, INS special registration, those were for people who were visiting, people who were in schools, people who were here for business visas and all those. So they were supposed to register. Once they did that, after that they were supposed to re-register every year, and that's when our organization started this program, that we have to stop this re-registration. The reason being, if you're registered, if you change your work, you have to re-register. If you go out of the country, you have to re-register. If you move your household, you have to re-register.
Is there a problem with re-registering? It's like updating the information.
Yeah, but why?
Like we update our contact information.
Right. So if you are required to do every time you change anything, you update, then why are you requiring everybody to go every year? That's waste of resources. So we build a coalition, some for the justice cause and some for the economic cause. That's we had built a broad coalition, and we started fighting this re-registration program. After 2 years, we were able to stop this re-registration program.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that, there is no need for this program. They registered about 86,000 people, and not a single terrorist was caught. So why are we wasting our country's resources for something that is not there? So what Nunu was talking about before, all these people who had overstayed the visa, those 86,000, 13,000 were put in jail. Now from those 13,000, they had U.S. children. They were born right here. When their fathers are deported.
Were they deported?
13,000 were deported.
Because they had overstayed their
They
visas.
had overstayed the visas. So from those 13,000, the women were here, and they had a choice, either raise their children without the fathers or go back, take their US born children back. And those women would not have survived. A lot of them were homemakers, young mothers and all that. So they were forced to just take the US born children back to wherever they came from.
The children were considered U.S. citizens.
The children were born here, so they were US citizens.
Of those 13,000, do you know if any returned or were allowed back into the country?
No, once you are deported, there is a
Were
seal.
they deported?
They were deported.
Or did they leave voluntarily?
No, no.
There were
Once they are picked
the
up.
13,000 were the men.
Yes.
The others who left were family members.
Yes.
They left voluntarily.
They left voluntarily.
So they could come back if they were U.S. citizens or if they had
Kids
green
could have come back
cards.
once they grew up a
But
little bit.
for as far as you know, they did not.
I'm sure if the kids were just right now, it is just 15 years. If they were, college age students now, they might come back, just, go study in a college and all that. But I haven't kept up with that.
Sure. Now, let us get back to the question I would ask you of those from African communities being 5 times more likely to be picked up, even more so than those of Latino heritage. Why is that?
Could I briefly
Sure,
sort of connect to
sure,
what Samina
sure,
was saying?
sure.
So going back to the conversation we started about the children, right? Because children range in age up until under
Maybe
18.
18. Okay.
Right? So when their parents are picked up, you have 13,000 men who've been picked up and deported. The family's been broken, and that voluntarily going to Pakistan or to whatever is an option, but whichever way, the family's broken. And what this does to children, particularly male children, is send a very clear message that even though America's rhetoric about family values and all that, it defies all this because the children are seeing what's actually happening, and it radicalizes them, right? Because now this hate or this anger gets taken advantage of by the language of radical Islam that says, "Come, we will welcome you. We can be your family, even though America has rejected you." So we turn around and claim, in the case of Americans who join ISIS, or that how could they do this? How could they have betrayed us? That because they were born in the United States, they're American citizens. How could they do that? So it links to with the family, right? Because like I said before, you cannot separate the experience of the family, of the parents, with that of the children.
And you said particularly male, but there are females
who've
absolutely left this country and gone to join ISIS.
That's true. That it's largely men, but definitely there have been, I think, an increase of, I haven't seen any statistics on this, but definitely there's been an increase. So going back to what we were talking about in terms of Black immigrants being targeted, I think you might find it of interest, and your viewers might find it not just of interest, but a little bit surprising that despite being, I'd say the numbers, the nationwide for immigrants just from Africa is under 2 million. At least that's what the census counts. They don't count the children, as I was saying earlier, because they're children born in the United States, so we account for that. It doesn't count for the undocumented because clearly they haven't been captured enough by the census to be counted. So if you count all that, our own estimate is closer to 5 million. So you have 5 million people born in sub-Saharan Africa that are living in the United States, which is, 3% of the overall immigrant population. So you have this 3% being picked up at 5 times higher rate than all the other, an estimated 11 million
That's incredible, because when
immigrants.
you think of roundups, you don't think of Black Africans from Sub-Sahara. Right. The only thing I can think of is the fact that Black males in this country, Black American males, are picked up far more often and charged with very offenses.
And that's exactly
so it
how
could
it
very
goes.
well be because they are of darker complexion, that they're just treated as, they might, I mean, you can't just necessarily say they're African, but the fact that they have, their skins are darker, they might be targeted.
Absolutely. So you cannot, the argument that we make, and the document, the research document, the State of Black Immigrants makes, is you cannot separate the nexus of race from the current immigration policy. It's not just current, actually. It's always been that way. And there is no case that proves this more clearly than that of Black immigrants, that Black males are arrested at much higher rate, disproportionately, right? We make 30, and I say we because I've lived in the United States long enough to claim African American identity. We make up less than 13% of the US population. And yet the incarceration rate is 60-something percent. So it's extremely disproportionate in terms of the likelihood that if you're a young male between the ages of 17 to 35, 1 of 3 have had some encounter with the police. So when you bring this experience into the immigrant community, and I'm talking about the Black immigrant community, with none of the historic context, with none of the expectation that when you see a police officer, you don't have none of the triggers that tell you be careful, you should put your hands down and be prepared. We are in fact so openly embracing this idealism of egalitarian and fairness in America.
An
that
opportunity.
an opportunity, so that when you encounter a police officer, you don't have none of the guards and the triggers that warn you to be careful. So you tend to speak and incriminate yourself. If you are in a place where you shouldn't be, you don't exercise your rights. So chances of that encounter are high because you're a black male or female for that matter. So the chances of being picked up and detained are all that much more higher because of the race. So it cannot be separated from the race.
So, are we talking locally? Are we talking nationally,
Nationally.
in general?
Nationally.
Are we talking where there might be larger African populations?
No, this is across the board. Regardless of where the highest populations are, studies that have been conducted nationally, and people can go to this research document that I was talking about and find, this is not just Africans, it's Black, Caribbean, Afro-Latinos, and Black African immigrants as well.
And that website again is Black. Yes.
blackimmigration.org.
Oh, okay. Or it might be .net.
I'm pretty sure it's .org.
Oh, okay. Now, do you have for the Muslim community?
I just want to follow up what Nunu said.
Sure.
I have two stories that relating to that.
Sure.
So after 9/11, you know, the children that are born here of immigrant families, they believe wholeheartedly they are Americans, right? As Americans as apple pie. Now, that's the most tragic thing to me, because after 9/11, my son at that time was about 19 years old. He was a UC Davis student. And I had to have this conversation with him that if police stops you, you do exactly what they're asking you to do. Even if they're asking you to put your hands up, open your car, lie down on the floor, whatever it is, you must do that, because they'll shoot you first and ask you questions later. That was my fear as a Muslim mom.
No, he was not wearing any identifying clothing or anything.
He looks like, you know, a darker complexion, just like I am. I'm not white, I'm not considered white. So, you know, those were the things that were happening to young Muslim students at that time, and the young males. My son's first reaction was, Mom, I'm not going to worry about the policeman. I'm an American. If I haven't done anything, I know my rights. That was the hardest thing I had to do in my life. Convince my son not to do anything. And he put the question out, Mom, you are out there in rallies, you are in front row and you're telling me. I said, yes, I'm in the front row. Let me be in the front row, but you stay back. And I did that for all my Muslim community, you know, young men.
Did he have any encounters with
Yes,
them?
and here is why it paid off. One of the trip, he was going back and his car was registered. I registered his car and I told him, please put the sticker on when you go. He forgot to take the sticker.
The registration sticker
The
that goes on
registration
the
sticker.
license plate.
Yes. So he forgot, and the policeman stopped him and asked him to get out of the car and lie down on the ground and open your car and all that.
Just because he didn't have the registration
And
sticker?
they have the information that car was registered, it was paid for.
He was in the car by himself.
Yes, he just didn't have the sticker on. So he got out, he did all that. They towed his car, impounded it, and left my son on the highway. Now, have you ever heard anybody ever deserted like that?
No. Usually, if they impound your car, you can drive with the tow truck driver.
No, my son called me from the highway just to tell me, my mom, my car is impounded and this is what happened. And I said, where are you? He said, I just called my friend, he's coming to pick me up.
He was on the highway.
He was on the highway.
They didn't charge him with anything
No, because
except for not having proper registration.
not having the sticker.
But they knew that it had been properly registered.
Of course, because they have the information, right?
So on what grounds did they impound the car? That he
Just
wasn't...
you didn't have a sticker on. They're the policemen. But I am so glad my son complied.
So you had to pay extra to get it out.
Of course, we had to pay for,
And
you know.
did you complain to anybody?
Who? Complained to who? This was after 9/11. I was happy my son was okay. I was happy we got our car back. So that's one thing.
And his attitude completely changed.
His attitude changed, but he wanted to fight after that. And I said, no, this is the reason I told you. They can stop you. Just like, look, these black Americans did not migrate here. They were brought here
In chains.
in chains. Till this day, they are not equal. They are not getting the equal treatment. So we cannot expect anything, you know, equal or fair. Right now, what I'm doing is I'm asking my fellow Americans who are white, you are privileged people, please know that you're privileged, stand up and be the voice for the voiceless.
Why should they?
Because
I mean, if you have privilege,
Why?
why should people give up their privilege?
No, I'm not
What's in
saying
it
give
for
up
them?
their privilege.
No. But, I mean, there was a reason black people were enslaved for so long.
yes,
And had housing discrimination or job discrimination.
still happens.
Yes. So why should people with privilege give up their privilege when they have a certain status
If
that's
they
in
are-
their interest?
If they are people of faith, if they truly believe in Jesus or any God.
Oh, they would say they do. The evangelicals would quote the Bible up and down.
Yeah, it doesn't matter, but you can quote up and down, you could provide the sermons every Sunday, but are you practicing it? That's what I'm asking.
Well,
Practice
it's
it.
been said traditionally that churches are some of the most segregated
Right.
places.
Right.
So that's one story. The second story I wanted to share, what Nunu was talking about, the black kids and male and all that. My best friend in America is in a black family, the whole family. That's like my extended family. So Michelle and I and Bob, we met at Stanford where my ex-husband was doing his PhD. Michelle had twin girls. They were 4 years old. Then she got pregnant, and when she learned she was having a boy, I went to ask how it is. Do you know what you're having? She said, yes, she's having a boy. And I said, why are you so sad? She was crying. I would never forget those cries. That's the first time I learned what happens to black males.
And she was crying.
She was crying.
What year was this?
That was what was that? I would say it was somewhere 1988, 85.
One has to be optimistic.
No, but she was crying because she said, Samina, you don't know what happens to the African male, you know, the black males in this country.
Not all of them.
Yeah, but, you know,
I mean, I raised one.
no, I understand. John Michael is perfect young man. He's just, you know, has done his master's and all that, working.
But that does not say that they aren't in danger. An endangered species.
They are endangered.
So, comments?
I mean, it goes straight to the heart, what you just said, that a mother, you know, giving birth to a male child. And we've read this through history, right? Because you know, as an enslaved person, what happens to your child when you give birth is supposed to be a happy moment, but you're projecting all the fears of what will happen and how society will treat your child.
And
With the-
it's been said, of course, that what you project, what you think about, you help bring about.
Some of it is reality. It's not sort of prophesized in terms of what you expect. It's just, I think, facts have made it pretty evident since the
That there's
founding of
certain
this country.
chances
That
or
if you are
risk involved.
right, and the highest, most targeted is young black men. There was a study, this young woman doing her PhD, I think it was from Berkeley, showing from 1988, from 18. This is before the Emancipation Proclamation. She was researching in the books, the slave owners' books, and the highest valued property was a young male between the age of 18 and 22. The absolute, I think, it was, the money maker.
Could do the most work,
Right.
would be the
Exactly.
strongest.
And so you come, a century and a half, 2 centuries in advance, and you have the most threatened, member of society. But looking at, because we're talking about immigrants, as I was saying earlier, the experience of immigrants primarily from Africa, because never having been a member of the diaspora, because it's different when you're coming from a sub-Saharan African country as opposed to Haiti or the Caribbean. If you've never been part of the global diaspora, and this is your first experience in being outside of your country, and having been part of a largely black society, you don't have the framework, the necessary framework to understand the history of
unless you've been doing a lot of reading. Now, you mentioned the global diaspora. Explain that, because it's not a common term for many people.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. It's thrown around rather frequently without properly contextualizing it, and I would say members, sort of descendants of Africa, right? Because
all over the globe.
Global, because the first forced removal of Africans from Africa was through the slave trade, right? That brought people to the Caribbean, to Brazil, and to the United States. So you've got that diaspora, all ancestors originating from Africa, and then you have the new diaspora, people
Those
who are leaving
coming voluntarily.
Sometimes voluntarily, because the term is problematic too, right? Because you're leaving in order to pursue education, or
Yes,
there's
a
a war
better
at home,
living,
or right.
or-
So that voluntary term is definitely different than enforced enslaved laborers of the transatlantic.
Yes,
But the
and-
voluntary is a different kind of voluntary.
And one does not assume that it's part of the sex trade or some form
Exactly.
of
Trafficking.
Yes.
Exactly. So you've
Yes.
got.
Or for less wages, where
Right.
people are brought in and
Right.
taken advantage of.
So when we use the word diaspora, it's simply put, it means you originated, or your ancestors originated one place, and you're now in another.
So
It's as simple as that.
when you heard of Trump as a candidate talking about immigration, I don't know that many people would have thought along the lines of what you're just now talking about. It was always thought of as targeted people from Latin American countries, primarily Mexico.
Yes.
There's no talk of building a wall to keep out people from
Right,
Africa.
Or just have a Muslim ban.
Yes, exactly.
That's unfortunate, because the executive order and the Muslim ban and all that has captured the attention of the headlines, but the policy and the operationalizing of deportation that is happening on a daily basis to immigrant communities has not changed.
So the question might be, it's somewhat under the radar, but what would happen if there were more light brought on it? Would there be more focus, where more of the American public then would be more mindful that these are African immigrants who should be targeted?
I don't think
I'm thinking the reaction might be compounded.
I don't think we make a case to say we need to only lift up our case. We do, in the work that we do with Samina, with American Muslim Voices and others, we lift up the commonalities. And what we do, despite everything else that has happened, as Black people, and I say that despite, meaning the history of brutality that has happened against our people, is we continue to insist on our common humanity. That is the message that we've always made. Not to say, don't deport me, I'm the good person,
Yeah.
I'm the model immigrant. We say it's wrong on moral reasons, what is happening to all people. When you're right, what captures the attention is, when you say the Muslim ban, they look at Samina, her name, or Ahmed, or Ali, which are sort of the profiled. But you have people that are Muslim and Black,
Yeah.
from many African countries, primarily from South.
So you talk about the work that you do together. I'd like to get to that. But before doing that, let's go to the mentality that was developed, what brought all of this. Now, I'm sure it was there very subtly before 9/11. This is something that we've always dealt with, but it was completely heightened, the fears with 9/11, and then with some of the things that have happened recently with the rise of ISIS and violence in Europe. And so how do you say to people in terms of calming their fears?
So I think it's more than calming their fears, it's educating them that look at the root cause of a problem. You cannot just treat a symptom.
What's the root cause?
The root cause is that our foreign policy, how we treat other. Even let's say I've been here for 38 years. I still don't fully feel that I have been accepted as an American citizen. Yes, I have a paper that says I'm an American citizen.
Well, Samina, there would be Black people in this country who would say they don't know that they've been fully accepted.
Exactly. So
as
I'm not just saying.
Americans.
Yeah. So I'm not just saying
equal
that.
rights and opportunities.
Yes. So when I talk about that, I don't talk about Muslims, just like Nunu said, that I talk about this, the rights for Native Americans, the right of the African Americans, the right of Chinese, Japanese. I have gone to the pilgrimage to see what have they done to the, people who just were detained there.
Well, the Trump supporters supported him because he was talking about make America great again, take back your country.
So then let's give back the country to the original owners.
Let's
just give it back to the Native Americans.
Let's be real fair.
There
Exactly.
were
be real
millions of them.
Right.
No,
In
but
the
let's
very
just give it back
beginning.
to them and ask them who would they like to keep here
Right.
and who would they like to kick out.
But the sentiment that is most prevalent now, I think what you're addressing in terms of the climate we're in, is fear.
Yes.
So
it
we
is
know the fear
Fear
on
of
behalf.
a lot of things.
No, but
fear
we know the fear
economically.
of us, the immigrants. But the fear on the other side
Yes.
is this loss of identity more than anything else, which I think Trump was able to capture, right? Make America great again. And the subtext of that is, white supremacy. There is no other way to put it but white supremacy. To reclaim the supremacy of white people in this country. And as we see the emergence of beyond the rhetoric, right? Because we're seeing the demographic changes. Immigrants, not just immigrants, but Latinos are some of the highest growing in this country. We're seeing Black Lives Matter, right? The movement for Black lives being more prominent and more visible. All these are sending messages that it's coming at the expense of white communities. So and I'm not saying there's absolutely no claim to their fear, because there has been losses of jobs and taking, corporations have taken jobs away from the United States, but it's not immigrants and it's not people of color that are to blame.
Yes.
But he was able to target the message in such a way as to convince a majority of people that if only Muslims were banned, if we were to deport so many people, you would have your country back. And this is
Now,
a
not
delusionment.
only that, but not to get off too much, opening up protected lands.
Right.
Yes, to make the economy grow. we probably shouldn't get there. But it's all a part.
It is all
isn't it?
connected.
It's all connected.
Everything is
Yes.
connected.
Yes.
So basically what it comes down to is that greed of rich people. And they want more and more and more, even just this tax cut.
Yes, but you can't say that to the person in Ohio or Iowa or Pennsylvania, the blue-collar person who's lost his or her job or might be unemployed. And it's interesting, the highest rate of suicide now is among white males. The very highest growing rate of suicide in this country.
You know, in all honesty, I really wish that I could go there, or lots of us could go there and talk to them.
And say,
I care about them. That's the first line I would say. And I am actually really worried the day they're going to see they, elected Trump, thinking that he's going to make America
yes,
great
do you
again
know what
and
they
to help
might
them.
say to you when you say you care about them? They might say, well, Samina, get out of our country.
Well, this is my country too. Samina can say lots of things too. But I would say let's just stand together. And that's the, the work I've been doing, building Martin Luther King's beloved community and peace. And peace would happen only when we have a dialogue, not a debate. There is a huge difference.
A dialogue, what's the difference? Tell us the difference.
So dialogue is when two people with open mind are sitting and sharing their concern and
well, you
listening
first
to
have
each
to get
other.
an open mind. How do you cultivate an open mind?
So then, just like at the Santa Clara County, there was a resolution being passed that county would protect the vulnerable communities, and there were Trump supporters there, and they spoke. There were about 30 of them, and they said they're feeling like they're targeted and all that. So they're just like, they're feeling harassed, they're feeling threatened, they're feeling all that. So when my turn came to speak, I just acknowledged them first. I said, I totally understand if you're feeling threatened. I totally understand. I empathize, I sympathize with you because I know how it feels. Since 9/11, I have been feeling that. So all I can say is I am having a gathering at my, place. You are all invited.
Did anybody come?
I think one person came to our Eid festival. They didn't say their name. While we had the surveys done, about 82 people said they had wonderful time and everything was perfect. This one person said they didn't feel welcome. They didn't like the parking area. They didn't like the program. The MC was too young. So they didn't find anything right. So, but I was happy that they came.
So, if you were to go to Middle America to talk with individuals, what would you say?
Well, I'd say definitely, first thing, I would not put myself in a position of going unless I'm part of a delegation.
Okay, now
That's
let
first.
me take that
Can I
back.
continue?
Sure, go on.
The second thing is you don't talk to people who don't even acknowledge your humanity. That's where we are right now. That's the reality. The only language there is get out of my country. And the response, this, I belong here too, this is my country too, is heard from, well, you don't look like me. So you have no claim to this country. So there's no sort of preface to even beginning a conversation. So there is of two minds, right? There are people like Samina, whose faith, whose Muslim faith, is to say that all religions are common. Mm-hmm. Let's sit down, break bread, and talk. And there are the other mind, which says, you do not push me. I am no doormat. The term immigrant does not make me vulnerable. The term undocumented does not make me vulnerable. I know my rights, and I fully intend to exercise my rights.
Yes,
from voting
but do you have rights if you're undocumented? Some would say if you're undocumented in this country, if you're an immigrant, then you do not have the rights of citizens.
Definitely, you don't.
But you
have
still
them.
have rights.
Exactly, you still have rights. The most important right that you have as a human being It's in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that no one can negate.
Yeah.
Your humanity is not someone a piece of paper is going to say. In fact, when you said earlier to Samina that as African Americans, we have been in this country and we still don't feel that we belong. Reverend Lawson, who both Samina and I know is a senior pastor in the Methodist Church, and I always quote him because he says when we were having a seminar for largely Latino, Spanish-speaking immigrants, the claim was, we need our citizenship, nothing else matters, let's just get our citizenship. And his response was to say, we have been citizens. Let me tell you about the 14th Amendment. That doesn't mean anything. We're still brutalized. We're still incarcerated at disproportionate numbers.
Yeah.
Citizenship in and of by itself is not enough.
Yes.
You need to exercise your right. Once you know what that citizenship means, that you need to vote, you need to stand up for your rights. So while there is that arm that's extended that say, let's share a meal. Listen to me as I will listen to you. Respect me as I will respect you. You know, offer an olive branch. The other side says, but if you don't respect me, I will not let you walk over me.
Yes, but, and I say a but, short of violence, how do you communicate?
Absolutely
Because
no violence.
we're talking
Yeah.
about polarization.
Yes. In fact,
And if you're not extending that olive branch, if you're not saying, let's sit and talk, how then do you communicate with all of these people who say, I want to take back my country? Now, there are those who voted for Trump, who said, we're not racist.
right.
We are doing this because of economic reasons, because of some of the policies of the prior administration
Right.
that have left us out.
And it's equally important, as we were saying, to listen to their grievances, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's polarized. I don't think it's either bearing arms to stand for your rights or keeping true to your beliefs and standing, holding up to your position. I don't think those are the dualities. I think
No,
there's a
they're
middle
not.
ground.
Yeah.
And the middle ground is?
It's what civil disobedience was all about.
But
will
I just
not,
want to follow up on that.
I repudiate
Yeah.
violence. Does not mean, but I'll stand here and let you, take a beat on me either. There's a middle ground.
So while I do all this work, I invite people in my home, organize events and all that kind of stuff, that doesn't mean I would let people walk all over me. That's a choice that I make, that I want to do that. But, if somebody tells me that I'm not an American, I don't need to have a debate with them. I know I'm an American. I know I have my rights. I know what my rights are. So nobody is going to do that, push me around. It's just that, I always teach young kids, especially males, because they are targeted more than anybody else, to let us women just take the, front rows, just like black women used to do that, They fought, they took care of the families. So that's the role models that we have.
So there is the idea that's coming out very, very vividly, there's scarcity in this country. There isn't enough for everybody. I mean, that's the underlying message. If you get something, it's at my expense. The jobs,
the zero-sum game,
housing.
right.
Exactly. So what's the answer to that?
That's ridiculous.
Well, I'd say the first thing is that the framework is the economic framework, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about the foundation of the United States, which is a capitalist country. And capitalism, as defined, is grow, 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 unabated, keep wages low, profits high, and even human beings, enslaved Africans, were chattel, who were commodity, right? This is the system on which this country was founded. Under that kind of principle, then that scarcity means when Samina has some, she obviously took it from me. And if I am a privileged white male, my position was here, and now I'm unemployed or homeless, then it makes clear sense to me that me having less is her having more. So it's so much easier to target an individual or a community for that anger without necessarily looking at the bigger structure that says, wait, there's something wrong with the system. The
That she's as poor as you are,
Right.
probably.
But
Yeah.
when they see, when the most prominent kind of visible communities are the privileged, immigrants, that comes as what we were saying. She must have profited under my expense, on my expense. That she has a job, she has a home, and I don't, and therefore it sort of correlates.
So how do you change that? Because those are the dynamics going on.
Right. So, which
The
is why I
underlying
went
dynamics.
back to the formation of this capitalist system that doesn't have an equal distribution of resources. We're seeing gentrification. We're seeing unprecedented levels of homelessness, whereas the rich in this country, I think it's the
Getting richer.
3%,
Are getting richer.
right,
And the poor are getting poorer.
70-something%
And the
of
country's losing its middle class.
right. So it's not
Oh,
about
it's already
distribution.
lost. I don't think they're losing. It's gone. Middle class is gone. And I think it's the message that, we have a president who is supposedly filthy rich. And I don't understand why those people who voted for him are not looking at their own needs. They have just voted against their own
They would
needs.
say they are looking at their own needs and voting for somebody who said he's going to bring jobs back to America. It's about jobs.
That would be a sad day
Right.
when that realization.
It's more
would
about
take.
identity than it's
Yeah.
about the economics. It's wanting to belong with someone who's made it makes me closer and likely to get part of that piece is what they're voting for.
That's a delusion.
It's a delusion.
That is a
It's
huge
absolutely
delusion.
factually not
now
proven.
we're talking about, or we started out talking about immigrant children. But what we're talking about is immigrant families in general and the plight of immigrant people. Are we not?
Yes.
Or people who don't look like the mainstream, people who look different. Now, you talked about the work that you do and how you work together. What work are you doing? What are your priorities right now?
Well, right now, as it happens, we're preparing for a meeting this weekend with 4 communities from Liberia, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. These 3 communities
That's 3.
were from the
I'm sorry.
Ebola threatened countries, and they had what was called a temporary protective status, which had been renewed under President Obama a few times. It's just been revoked. So as of May 20th, there are an estimated, I think, probably 5,000 people who will be undocumented as of May 21st. Because their temporary protective status will have expired, and this administration has made it clear they will not renew it.
How did they get protected status from those countries? They were here.
Well, Liberia is a different case because it has that long history with the United States, as you
Yes.
know. The other 2 countries, because of the Ebola crisis that was threatening, they had, if they were in the United States and they were undocumented, or they were under the visa which expired, they were allowed to stay
because
That's
of the
what was going on in their home
epidemic
countries.
okay.
Right. Then you have the Somalis. Some of the largest number of Somalis in the Bay Area are actually right here in the South Bay. Nationally, 4,000 to 5,000 Somalis are being deported, are targeted for deportation. Some of whom have already been detained
Why?
because they, if they are
Overstay of the visa.
right, if they're out of status, the opportunity to fight it is no longer there.
Well, would you say, some people would say, but it's their own fault if they've overstayed their visas and they're out of status.
The thing is, once you overstay your visa, there is a system by which you can claim, you can appeal. You're married to an American citizen, you have children who are American citizens, you have employment. There's a system through which you can legalize yourself, you can change your status. When you're detained and deported, that comes to an end.
For 10 years,
And-
you cannot re-enter
Right.
the country.
And when you're talking about Somalia, people know what state of conflict and war it is.
But why? What is it that stops people from working on their status, doing all of these things before their visas run
One
out?
is cost, enormous amount of cost. You know how much immigration attorneys cost? Two is finding the time when you're working 2 jobs and trying to support a family to make time to speak with an attorney. 3 is the fact that we were saying earlier, you get picked up while jaywalking or doing something innocuous, which thousands and millions of Americans do on a daily basis, and you get picked up, you get flagged, you're deported, the families don't know where you are, suddenly you've just disappeared, so there is no system. through
So
which-
you're saying you'll be meeting.
So we're meeting with the people, with the members of these community, with the leadership. And the first thing we're going to do is say, you have rights. I think that's the assumption that people have if you're undocumented. And the know your rights, guides. For example, not saying anything. Don't sign anything. Don't say anything.
Don't even tell them your name. If
These are
somebody
Well, they
simple-
can arrest you, can't they, for not
They do.
even
No.
identifying
Right.
yourself?
They'll take you into detention. They cannot deport you. So in that period, you're buying time.
And you're
So you
not
can get an
telling your
attorney,
name at all?
Not your name. They can find it in your documents if they have to. You're not signing anything. So giving this information to people who are detained is the first step to say, you do have rights.
Okay, now we have less than 2 minutes. What can we say to...
So I think one thing that we should have talked about is that when kids are being bullied in school, those conversations take place in the homes. So if the grown-ups are talking bad about gay, lesbian, transgenders, the kids would bully those kids in school. If they are talking about Latinos, they are drug dealers and they are rapists and all that, those kids would go to school.
So
and
we
they
have
would-
less than a minute.
So what we need to do is really for grown-ups to pay attention to what conversations they're having and how this might be affecting their kids and other kids in the society. And we have to just create a village that raises all children together. That's the goal. The day we will just all start thinking about these are not just somebody else's kids, they are our kids, things would start changing.
Well, I'd love to give you the final word, but we have
I
less...
just totally support what
Yes.
Somina said, lifting up our common humanity and our commonalities.
Well, we're going to have to end it with that, lifting up our common humanity and recognizing that we live in a global village. Thank you so very much
Thank
for
you,
sharing
Henrietta.
that
Thank you for having
idea.
us. It's a pleasure.
pleasure. It's a pleasure to have you, our viewers, watching. Until next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this for decoration?
Thank you.